Oh hey, welcome back. Have you ever wondered what the offset bridge would look like if it was redesigned by a mathematician? Well, wonder no more, because today we're checking out the amazing piece of engineering that is the Tuffset Bridge. If you'd like to support me, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share this with an offset nerd. I'm currently in the process of making really detailed reviews for every single offset bridge on the market. So if you have any questions about a particular offset bridge or are really intrigued about how good a particular bridge is or how well it works, stick around because rest assured I will cover it in due course, if I haven't already. If there's a particular offset bridge you're really excited to see next, please let me know what that is in the comments below. So who are Tuffset anyway, and what do they know about offset bridges? Well, Tuffset is the brainchild of Dan Katz, and what Dan doesn't know about offset bridges probably isn't worth knowing. Dan is a bona fide offset guitar lover, and he's built some amazing custom offset guitars via his custom build service, Guitar Form. And just in general, he's an all-round lovely, friendly bloke. The development of the Tuffset Bridge as the ultimate remastering of the offset bridge design started back in 2019, and after 5 years of thorough research and development and prototyping and testing, the Tuffset Bridge finally hit the shelves last year in 2024. With no component, surface, nook or cranny left unexamined, every single element of the Tuffset Bridge has been re-engineered and redesigned and refined to maximize performance and minimize drawbacks. Let's take a closer look at the design of this bridge, and then we'll assess whether it has been engineered to perfection or whether it's had all of its soul and character designed out. In broad terms, the Tuffset Bridge offers a 6-saddle design that is both locking and rocking. There's a few different offset bridges that can boast of this though, so what is it that makes the Tuffset design so special? The Tuffset Bridge has been so carefully optimized to achieve the best possible functioning of the rocking mechanism and to deliver the highest degree of dependability and stability an offset bridge has ever had. To achieve this, Dan has created the first ever fully locking offset bridge design on which every single component is locked securely into place. Dan's also completely eliminated the use of springs and all other tiny non-locking components that are normally found in an offset bridge that are so often culprits of producing unwanted noise, buzz and rattle. On top of this, every single component has been carefully redesigned slightly smaller than the original vintage design to ensure that this bridge has absolutely zero impediments to its rocking function. That is, this bridge will never bottom out against the body or pick guard, it will never make unwanted contact against a Fender mute, and it will never make unwanted contact with the bridge cymbals either. Another factor aiding the rocking design of this bridge is that the Tuffset boasts a 60-degree string groove slot, just like original vintage Jazzmaster and Jaguar bridges, just as Leo Fender intended and designed. and the 60-degree slot offers optimal grip of the saddle on the string to make sure the string is always pulling the bridge backwards and forwards with it as intended. Okay, now while we are going to do a really detailed deep dive review on the Tuffset Bridge, I do think it's important to cover what my first impressions were when I first got this bridge out of the box and when I first installed it as well. The first thing that really struck me about the Tuffset Bridge is that it is so much more dainty than I expected. Seeing those large pictures on Instagram and on the website, and knowing how highly engineered it is, I was assuming that this was going to be a real big chunky bridge, kind of similar to the Bensonite bridge. And so I was really surprised when I took it out of the box and found how dainty and small it actually is. The thing that really struck me about this is the juxtaposition between how rugged and highly engineered it is, yet being so dainty and petite at the same time makes it surprisingly beautiful. Secondly, and I know this is a kind of silly one, I really liked the fact that the Tuffset packaging doesn't just have a Jazzmaster on it, it has a Jazzmaster, a Jaguar and a Mustang. I love the Mustang, my favourite guitar of all time is a Jaguar, and I do really like Jazzmasters too. And so often offset guitar products are just marketed as being for Jazzmasters because Jazzmasters are so popular. But I was really happy to see the Jaguar and the Mustang getting their fair share of attention and love as amazing offset guitars as well. And lastly, for first impressions, when I first installed the bridge, I was amazed at how pure and open and clear the tone of my instrument became. But we're going to come back to that in more detail in the positive section. Okay, so here is our Tuffset Bridge. We're going to have a quick close-up look at exactly how it looks like and all its components, and then I'm going to quickly demonstrate to you how it works as well. So if we get it out of this nice little stand it comes with, you can see the bridge is really small and petite in all of its dimensions. If we compare this with a traditional offset bridge, you can kind of see there how low profile the Tuffset is compared with this Mustang bridge. If you look at the legs, how skinny the legs are, as well as the overall thickness of the Tuffset bridge in this dimension versus a traditional Mustang bridge. And if you compare the Tuffset with a really beefy bridge, something like the Bensonite, it will become even more dramatic. So yeah, two pretty different beasts there. Now in terms of setting up the Tuffset bridge, we have to take our included Allen key, the skinnier one of the two, and we have to introduce slack into the saddles. And we do that by undoing this top screw on the saddle here. And you'll see immediately the saddle can now move freely in that groove. The less slack we introduce, the less freely the saddle can move. And we have to apply more force in able to move the saddle. And now we can move the saddle back and forth to set the intonation. We can also then adjust this screw here on the bottom, and that will enable us to adjust the saddle height. The bigger the adjustment you have to make, either to the intonation or the saddle height, the more slack you'll have to introduce to that top screw on the saddle. Particularly for setting the height of the saddles, especially if you have a 7.25 inch fretboard radius, you have to introduce quite a lot of slack on those middle saddles to get that set up correctly. As you introduce height onto the saddle, that slack is taken up that we've introduced on the top here. So I've done that maybe a quarter of a turn. This is where it was before. You can see there's loads of slack
on the saddle, it moves freely back and forth. But now as soon as we turn this a quarter of a turn to introduce more saddle height, that slack is now being completely taken up by moving that saddle. And I basically have no slack left. So if I want to raise that saddle anymore, I'm going to have to introduce more slack. The reverse is true as well. If we need to lower the saddles for any reason and we turn anti-clockwise, that is going to introduce more slack into the saddle. And so to finish off the height adjustment job, if we're lowering the saddles, we'll need to make sure we take all that slack out at the end by clamping down the top lock-in screw. In terms of adjusting the lock-in mechanism, we have a nicely branded Tuffset pick, and we carefully open these dust caps on the side. And then we can unscrew them. The locking mechanism is achieved by having a locking piece in here, which is secured with an Allen key. And underneath that we have a tiny ball bearing, which prevents the bridge post from moving when everything is locked into place. Once you've set your bridge height, you pop the ball bearing inside, you fasten down the locking pin on top, just until it starts to become snug. There we go. Now everything's locked in place. We can either leave the dust cap off, or personally I prefer the aesthetic of the dust cap on. And we can just secure that in place and then tighten it with the Tuffset pick. Using the pick to tighten it up at the end there just prevents any gouges that might be caused if we were to use a screwdriver, for example. And all of this is laid out really nice and clearly in the Tuffset installation guide. The instructions are really clear and we've got really nice diagrams throughout as well.
Okay, so having used both the steel saddle and brass saddle version of the Tuffset Bridge for about 3 months now, what are the positives of this design? Where do I think Dan has got it absolutely right? And what do I think is absolutely worth buying the bridge for? Well, first of all, this bridge is incredibly comfortable. It's possibly the most comfortable offset bridge I've ever played. In fact, when I first put this bridge on the guitar, strung it up and went to play and put my hand against the bridge, I thought I'd put my hand in the wrong place because the bridge is so low profile, so rounded and comfortable against the hand that it felt like there was no bridge there at all. And I thought I must have put my hand back here behind the bridge or just in front of the bridge because it was so comfortable. I was sure I must have missed. But when I looked down, my hand was resting on the bridge. It's just so comfortable, you don't even notice it at all. At first it was kind of weird and off-putting, but now I've got used to it. It is just so amazingly comfortable. And whenever I put a different bridge on this guitar, I immediately notice the fact that I can feel the bridge. Whereas this is just so comfortable on the hand. Secondly, as I already mentioned in the first impressions part of the video, the tone of this bridge is incredibly pure and open and clear. It feels like the guitar is able to ring out really naturally and uninhibited with this bridge on. It kind of feels like this bridge enables the guitar to project a really natural and authentic and organic version of its own voice. I couldn't think of a better way to describe it other than sounding very open and very clear, but Dan at Tuffset actually describes this as having more headroom. Dan attributes this to the fact that there is no energy being wasted going into little extraneous components rattling and buzzing around, but rather the whole bridge is able to resonate as one whole piece because everything is locked together. To try and be a little bit more specific, the tone of this bridge on this guitar is clear, open and bright with a tight and punchy low end. The sound of the brass saddle version on this guitar is a little bit looser in the low end, a little bit rounder and sweeter in the high end, and with the mid-range emphasis shifted up to the upper mids a little bit more. If you're interested in hearing a comparison between the steel version and the brass saddle version, you can hear that in my previous video, which will be up here somewhere. The third positive of the Tuffset Bridge is the fact that it is so easy to lock and unlock the bridge posts on this design. Unlike other bridges which require a proprietary specialist tool in order for you to be able to lock and unlock your bridge posts, for example the KMS Jam bridge, with the Tuffset you just need a pick and an Allen key, and that's it. It's so easy to do, it's so simple and effective, and you don't have to worry about losing the small specialist tool that the bridge comes with and then not being able to unlock your bridge posts anymore. I really like that because it's not forcing you to buy a particular tool from Tuffset in order to actually be able to use your bridge. You can just use it with standard guitar tools. Fourthly, I really like the fact that the Tuffset Bridge offers a really wide intonation range. This means that not only can you get your intonation tuned in perfectly on your regular Jazzmaster-to-Jaguar or Mustang, but you can also use this bridge for really unusual applications. For example, on a Bass 6 or on a Jazzmaster-to-Jaguar conversion guitar. So yes, if you were wondering, if you are interested in doing a Jazzmaster-to-Jaguar conversion, the Tuffset Bridge will actually have just enough intonation room for you to be able to use the Tuffset Bridge on a Jazzmaster-to-Jaguar conversion guitar. If you want more information about the Jazzmaster-to-Jaguar conversion process, you can check out the couple of videos I've published on that already, and there'll be more to come on that in the future as well. The fifth positive of the Tuffset Bridge absolutely has to be Dan himself and the customer service he offers. When I asked him any number of questions about the Tuffset Bridge, he gives me so much detailed information and feedback about the Tuffset Bridge and provides illustrations to make sure I understand the kind of more technical engineering side of things. And even though he's been answering questions about this bridge for at least 12 months now, and has been putting so much effort into publicizing the bridge and doing kind of PR for the bridge, he still has endless amounts of energy and enthusiasm for the Tuffset Bridge design, and I just find that so refreshing and amazing and just such great friendly customer service. I am a die-hard guitar nerd, and when I reach out to a company trying to find out some technical information or trying to confirm if a bridge will work in a particular application, I want to know a detailed answer to my question. You might have noticed I'm really into the details. And so often when you reach out to a company or a business or a manufacturer about a product, they will give you the minimum amount of information required, or sometimes a bit less than that, in order to answer your question. Or some people just never get back to you or aren't willing to disclose or discuss that kind of information. Dan has never ceased to amaze me with his super friendly, really detailed responses to every question I've had, and his customer service is just outstanding. The sixth positive of the Tuffset Bridge is that so much thought has gone into every single component. As I mentioned before, every surface, every nook and cranny, how every component comes together and how it interfaces with the guitar and the string and the player. The level of care and thought and love and attention to detail that has gone into the Tuffset Bridge, the 5 years of R&D that's gone into it as well, just means that you are getting such an amazingly detailed and thought through and precise piece of engineering to put on your guitar. It kind of really is taking the offset bridge concept, the offset bridge design to its ultimate end as the most perfectly engineered version of what an offset bridge could be. And that's pretty cool. My 7th positive on the Tuffset Bridge is the fact that the rocking mechanism works so reliably. On some rocking bridges in the past, I've felt it necessary to use those nylon shoulder bushings that you get to put inside your bridge thimbles, as I found other rocking bridges to slowly drift from their neutral resting point over time and end up fully forwards or fully backwards in the thimbles rather than remaining perfectly in the middle. This was especially the case with the stock Squier Classic Vibe bridge, but it can happen with other bridges too. However, the rocking function on the Tuffset Bridge works so perfectly. No matter how heavily or frantically I play, or how much I abuse the vibrato, the bridge always pulls back into its neutral resting point in the middle so reliably. And it's just such a joy to use something that works so well. Lastly, I think something needs to be said about the aesthetic of the bridge in more detail. I'm not going to lie, when I saw photos of this bridge online, I didn't really vibe with the look of it at first. As we've covered already, my first impression when I got it out of the box was that it was way more beautiful and striking in person than I first expected. And I do think that just like the Bensonite bridge, the Tuffset Bridge manages to toe a really careful line of being so thoroughly redesigned and such a different take on the offset bridge, and yet looking at home on both vintage and modern instruments as well. It kind of looks like, at least from a distance, a futuristic version of the Mustang bridge. And in the same way, I think the Bensonite bridge looks like it could have been part of a top secret R&D development project that Leo Fender did around the time of the Marauder, or maybe just after he moved to G&L. It kind of has an aesthetic that's reminiscent of the original offset design, but it's kind of like a space age retro-futuristic reimagining. And I really like that. So overall, despite my initial cynicism about the design when I first saw it online, I think Dan has done an amazing job of creating a bridge that would look perfectly at home on a very vintage traditional Jazzmaster or offset, as well as on a completely radical modern offset guitar. And I do think the brass side of design does have a hint of an RSD look to it as well, which is really nice because that's a really attractive bridge. So overall, a really good job on the aesthetic of this bridge. Editing Mark here, beaming in from the future. I just want to pause here because I hadn't initially intended to do a tone comparison in this video because I was aware it was going to be a pretty long one already, and I have seen some complaints about my videos being too long as they are. However, you know what they say, in for a penny, in for a pound. So let's do a quick tone comparison between the Tuffset Bridge and a more traditional offset bridge. The first bridge we're going to hear is a Fender MIJ stainless steel bridge with stainless steel saddles. We're going to have that back to back with the Tuffset Bridge to see what tonal differences we can perceive when we put the Tuffset Bridge on our guitar. Okay, cool. So what did you think? I think the first thing that's really going to stand out here is the difference in volume that you get between the MIJ bridge and the Tuffset bridge. The next thing you might notice is how actually that difference in volume seems to diminish as we go through the test. And you might think that I'm not using an equal amount of force in all the playing clips. However, the thing that's important to note here is that on my Sparkle Jag, I have the bridge pickup set very close to the strings, whereas the neck pickup, even by normal Jag standards, is set pretty far away from the strings. And so what that means is where we have the Victory V4 copper just before the point of breakup, when we have the 5 or 10% increase in output that the Tuffset bridge gives us, that's enough on the bridge pickup to push the amp into overdrive, because we're so close to the threshold of overdrive already. Whereas with the neck pickup, because it is so much quieter, because it's set so low, we are so much further away from that point of breakup on the amp. So even if we increase the output of that neck pickup by the same 5 or 10%, we're still not reaching anywhere near that threshold where the amp will start to break up. And that's the reason you have the disparity there between how much breakup you get with the bridge pickup and how little you get with the neck pickup and the middle ground that you get with the middle position. In terms of the tonal character of the Tuffset bridge, I think the tonal footprint is pretty similar to a traditional all-steel offset bridge. I think the low end is a little bit tighter, and I think you definitely hear that added clarity in the upper frequencies as well. But generally speaking, I would say you get more or less a full frequency boost with the Tuffset bridge. So I think that's really interesting. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this in the comments below. Alright then, back to scheduled programming. Okay, so by now we've covered all the positive things of the Tuffset Bridge, all the great things about it that make it worthy of your attention and your hard-earned money. But are there any things that aren't so great about the Tuffset Bridge? Is there any room for improvement or any negatives with the design? Well, there are 4 things that I didn't love quite so much about this bridge, but they're all relatively minor things. Let's get into it. Firstly, I found this bridge incredibly fiddly to set up, and I really didn't enjoy the initial setup process. At one point during the initial setup, while I was adjusting the intonation, having already set the saddle height, I just thought I wanted to go back and double check that I'd locked the saddle height in correctly. And in doing so, I completely knocked out the intonation, which I'd so carefully and painstakingly just got perfectly set. And that's because the mechanism that locks the saddle height in place is the same mechanism that locks the intonation back and forth movement. So you have to make sure you set the saddle height first and the intonation second, and don't go double back on yourself halfway through like I did, otherwise you'll knock the intonation out. I think it's a really clever system, and when it's all locked in place and nothing can move or rattle and buzz or move out of place at all, I think it is absolutely fantastic. But the process of setting it and getting it all locked in the first place is a bit more fiddly, at least the first time doing it. I found constantly having to adjust the slack whilst also trying to measure the radius of the saddles, all without trying to move the intonation adjustment forwards and back. Really frustrating and fiddly. But then again, I was doing it kneeling on the floor with my guitar on the sofa after a long and frustrating day at work, so maybe that's not representative. I'm sure it becomes more intuitive the more you do it, but it's something to be aware of, especially when you first get the bridge. Now, secondly, it absolutely can't be overlooked that the Tuffset is one of the more expensive offset bridges on the market, and that means naturally it's not going to be affordable for everyone. In the UK, the Tuffset Bridge is £209, the Descendant Companion Bridge is £215, the Mastery is £225, and the Thorn Brass Knuckle 2 is probably the best part of £250. So the Tuffset is in the top quartile of offset bridges price-wise. And that is naturally a downside for some people because they're just not going to be able to afford to drop 200 bags on an offset bridge. However, it has to be said, with this bridge, you know exactly where your money is going. The amount of work that has gone into this bridge is unbelievable. So while the price for the Tuffset might be expensive, I think it is absolutely worth every penny. And from that point of view, it is very good value, but you do have to have the money to buy the bridge in the first place. Now, the third negative with the Tuffset Bridge is to do with its compatibility with a Fender mute. Now, as I already mentioned in the previous part of the video, the bridge has been specifically designed to work with a Fender offset mute, and it does. However, I've found that the very low profile of the Tuffset Bridge means that more bridge height is needed clearing the bridge mute than with some other offset bridges. And the reason for that is because with the bridge set at the perfect height for this angled neck pocket on my Jag, we have a reasonable amount of bridge height, but there is not enough clearance there for the mute to sit underneath. Now, this isn't necessarily unusual, and if you've watched Mike Adams' video on him installing a Mastery bridge with a Fender mute, then you'll know that he had to do exactly the same thing there with his Mastery bridge as well. However, I do have other offset bridges, for example the High Spirit bridge, which is able to clear the Fender mute with this exact amount of pitchback on the neck without needing additional shims. However, for the Tuffset to be able to work on this particular guitar with my particular Fender mute, I am going to have to shim the neck in order to raise the bridge that bit more to get the clearance I need to stop the Tuffset just balancing and dangling over the top of the mute. And fourthly, the only other criticism I can possibly levy against the Tuffset Bridge is that on a guitar with the steel saddle version, it's not my favourite looking bridge on the instrument. Now, I know I've covered the aesthetic already, and I've covered it as a positive, both in my first impressions and in my positive section. However, one of the things I really like about an offset bridge is the contrast you get between the bridge base and the bridge saddles, either because the saddles have a different texture to them than the bridge base, for example if you think of a barrel saddle, or because they're made out of a different material, for example a brass saddled bridge, where you get a very distinct contrast between the bridge base and the bridge saddles. Because the whole of the Tuffset Bridge is made out of the same super high quality 303 and 304 stainless steel, it means that you don't really get a whole load of contrast between the aesthetic of the saddles and the aesthetic of the bridge base. And I would love for this design just to pop a little bit more as a standalone design. However, that being said, if we take a look at the brass saddle version, on the brass saddle version we get a really nice high contrast between the golden brass of the saddles and the silver of the stainless steel, and I think that looks really nice. The best way I've found to combat this with the all steel version is actually to place it on the Fender mute. The kind of brushed steel of the Tuffset Bridge against the shiny chrome of the Fender mute looks absolutely sick. It looks so nice. And I'm definitely going to get around eventually to shimming this neck so that I can put this bridge with the mute on this Jag. It looks awesome. So there you go. That's every single negative thing I can find to say about the Tuffset Bridge. Alright, so with all that being said, do I recommend this bridge and who is it for? Well, first off, this is an amazing bridge. The degree of thought, intentionality, research and care that has gone into every single component of this bridge and how those components fit together and how the guitarist interacts with those components and how it interacts with the rest of the guitar, all of that is absolutely insane on the Tuffset Bridge. Some offset bridges are desirable because they're a work of art. And while this bridge certainly is attractive, this isn't an artist's interpretation of what an offset bridge can be. This is the sensible, precise, intentional, and methodical redefinition of what the offset bridge can be. And it is incredible. Okay then, so who is this offset bridge for? I think this bridge is for the player who already loves the original Fender offset bridge design, but just wants it to work as effectively and reliably as possible. Despite all the engineering and thought that's gone into the design of this bridge, it ultimately isn't looking to reinvent the wheel, but just make sure the wheel rolls and works as well as it possibly can. The thought, hard work and research that has gone into the design of this bridge has all been intended to perfect the ideas first created by Leo Fender and his team with the original offset bridge. And while I described the tone of the Tuffset Bridge earlier as being very bright and open and pure sounding, really its character overall is pretty neutral. It's not adding any really noticeable spikes in the EQ, and it's not producing any noticeable dips or scoops in the frequency response either. It's just as if you've taken the original tone that the original offset bridge produces and you've refined and crystallized it to its most pure and beautiful form. So for anyone who loves the original Fender offset bridge and just wishes it could work the best it possibly can, this bridge is for you. Okay, and on the flip side, well, who is this bridge not for then? Well, first of all, this bridge is not for anyone who can't afford to spend 200 quid on a piece of hardware for their electric guitar. We've already covered, I think this is great value, but there's no getting away from the fact that that is a lot of money. And if you just don't have the financial resources to do that, or can't justify that kind of purchase, then unfortunately this bridge isn't going to be for you. Secondly, I think this bridge isn't going to be for you if you have a real preference for a bridge that is going to impart a different tonal character onto your instrument. Some people are looking for a bridge that's going to take away some perceived ice pick highs from their guitar, or that's going to give a particular different tonal character to their instrument's sound. If you've seen Lord Fuzzman's comparison of all the different headlong bridge materials on offer, you might understand what I'm talking about here. Thirdly, if you have a really strong preference for a non-rocking offset bridge, then this bridge is not going to be for you, because this bridge comes in a rocking form only. And fourthly, if you have a real preference for a more radical aesthetic to an offset bridge, something like the Mastery or the Headlong or any number of other bridges that really deviate from a more traditional appearance of an offset bridge, and you have a really strong preference for that, then again, this bridge isn't going to be for you. But maybe you should check out the brass saddle version. So for those of you who aren't able to afford the Tuffset but are really interested in a really cool and reliable rocking offset bridge that's a little bit cheaper, what would I recommend? Well, I will say there's a couple of offset bridge designs that I haven't yet tried. I haven't yet tried the Headlong, Descendant, Aldridge, Thorn Brass Knuckle, and a couple of others. However, if you're looking for a really good value for money, cheaper rocking offset bridge, I would highly recommend you check out the Bensonite bridge or the Trent Guitars offset bridge. Both of these bridges have also been designed with the goal of optimizing the rocking mechanism or rocking function of the offset bridge. And while they are very different to the Tuffset, if you don't have the money for a Tuffset and you're not able to save it either, those would definitely be bridges that I would consider checking out. Cool. Alright, well I think that's everything for today. I hope you've really enjoyed this close look at the Tuffset's design and its pros and cons as well. If you have a Tuffset bridge or are considering getting one, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. And if you have any questions about a particular aspect of the Tuffset that I didn't cover in this video, please leave them in the comment section below and I'll get back to you in as much detail as you would like. Until next time, take it easy, look after yourselves, and we'll see each other again soon.